Hello, and welcome to the Wildwood Institute for STEM and Research and Development podcast, also known as the WISRD Podcast. This is brought to you by WISRD Publications. WISRD is a student-run STEM research and engineering institute run out of Wildwood School in Los Angeles. Today on the podcast, we're talking with two WISRD board members, Sadie and Ximena, on their work with crop salt tolerance and hydroponics. Say hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. So we know you two work in the hydroponics lab at WISRD, but can you give us an idea of the broader implications of the research you're doing and the questions that are driving your exploration of salinity tolerance?
Yeah, of course. So our lab, the hydroponics lab, is built off of the San Joaquin Valley Salinity Crisis. And so the San Joaquin Valley, where a third of our region's crops are grown, the land is getting progressively saltier due to the natural buildup of minerals in the soil, as well as a saltwater contamination in the San Joaquin Valley aquifer. And so the hydroponics primary research goal is to observe what salt does to a plant, as well as find possible solutions to combat salinity crisis.
And give us some insight into how you're using the hydroponics lab as a vehicle for answering those questions.
So the reason why we're doing it hydroponically, or at least like our experiment, is so that we are able to control the variables that our plants are growing in. And so with hydroponics, because it's just water, we are able to determine exactly what nutrients and elements are going into our plants. And we are able to control like light, water flow, nutrients, as well as the salt. So it just takes out like the soil component.
All right, so what was the process of building the lab actually like? Like, how long did it take? What were the different iterations of it? And what plants did you choose to actually study?
So the whole building process took a long time. Our current lab took around 2 years to build. I think the whole process was very difficult. There were a lot of challenges that we faced. I know that as a group, there were a lot of disagreements. So we had to hold a lot of team meetings so that we could get everyone's perspective and opinion. And so now we have a lab with PVC pipes, and we have several valves to control the water flow that we designed. And Sadie also built a light frame for our plants, and we are growing Butterhead Butter Crunch lettuce.
Awesome. So what were some of the skill sets that you guys developed throughout the process of building that lab?
Well, I think we learned a lot of basic, or I guess a lot of manual skill sets, like how to use a drill. I know I didn't know how to do that beforehand. And so that was really interesting. But I think I learned a lot about how to really include everyone in a project, and, the importance of getting everyone's perspective, because everyone brings different viewpoints and different skills to the table. And it was really important to make sure that all possible problems were analyzed and solved before they actually became problems.
Yeah, so as you know, WISRD uses more of a contextual, context-based learning model. So how would you say that assisted and helped build upon what you guys are doing in hydroponics?
And can you speak to what a context-based learning model has been in your experience?
Well, WISRD doesn't really have a teacher, so we don't really have daily lesson plans or material that we have to cover because our teachers tell us it's important that will be tested on later. Instead, we kind of have to figure out what we think is important to learn and study. And so we weren't really given much direction. We kind of have to figure that out on ourselves. And this has led to a lot of failures and mistakes, but I think that the group has really learned to take them as learning experiences rather than thinking about them negatively.
So it sounds like your research process has really been driven by student questions rather than a set curriculum. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, definitely.
Got it. So where's the experiment now? What are you guys doing on a day-to-day basis? And how have you had to adapt to not having access to the WISRD lab?
So the hydroponics lab is actually in my garage right now at this moment. And from a day-to-day basis, what I do is I'm taking pictures of the lab. Oh, we're in our second trial of our experiment. And so now I'm taking daily pictures and sharing it on a group file so the members have access to it. I'm also taking daily salinity readings with a veneer salinity probe and my Texas instrument calculator. And so I will input that into an Excel spreadsheet. And so then hopefully we'll be able to graph and monitor basically the salt levels in the reservoirs.
So as you've been testing the salinity levels and how the plants are reacting, is that aligned with your initial hypothesis, or are those results surprising to you?
So in the first trial, my hypothesis was that the control was going to grow the most, and then the medium salinity concentration will grow second, and then obviously the one with the highest salt concentration would grow very minimal. But in fact, the second tube, which is the medium salt concentration, had the most biomass between all three of them. So that was very interesting. And looking closely at my lab setup, I realized that it could be due to the extra light shed from the other two light fixtures. And so the middle tube gets a lot more light than the other two on the outside. And so with this second trial, I put black wrap between the tubes so that each tube has its own sort of like light. So the light's just concentrated on that one tube.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that black wrap changes the results of trial 2.
Yes.
So we've heard that you've been developing a collaboration with the U.S. Department of Agriculture Salinity Lab at UC Riverside. Can you tell us how that collaboration really came to be, and what resources and what have you really gotten out of this incredible partnership that you've developed?
So one of the milestones our group sort of wanted to reach was a collaboration with an organization that's outside of the WISRD space and like outside the school. And we actually attempted to collaborate, I believe, in our sophomore year, so 2 years ago. But it was challenging because I think we were students and we were young, and so I'm not sure if people didn't take us really seriously. And so this time around, we had Joe, our COO, step in and sort of help guide our collaboration. So he reached out to our collaborator, and he sent our collaborator our websites and journals so that he can see our, credibility and what we're doing. And then from there, we got a meeting with him, a Zoom meeting, and it was a very, very beneficial meeting because we had some of our toughest questions answered during that time. And we were actually able to then progress with the lab even further. So one of the questions was, what salt concentration do we use for our lab? That was one of the questions we were stuck on. We didn't know exactly how we were going to go about that. But our collaborator suggested 40 millimoles and 80 millimoles, and we ran with that. And so now that's what we're implementing into our lab. And then another one is what do we do with the data after the trial is finished? How do we collect the data? And so we gave good suggestions with taking biomass, root mass, shoot mass. And so that's what we're doing.
So do you think because your research is so tied into people's livelihoods as farmers in the San Joaquin Valley, do you think that gives you an added importance to what you're doing? Because people's livelihood and the food security of the whole state of California is kind of in tied with your project?
It's definitely a motivation for our project. It gives our project a sense of purpose and not just, some sort of school science project. No, this is like a real world problem that we're trying to put our inputs in. And so it's a motivation for us to continue forwards.
Yeah, that definitely seems like a strength of your project, and what a lot of other people are doing in WISRD is that this isn't just an assigned task by a teacher in a traditional learning setting. It's really student driven and has real impact in the world. So that sounds like a really important aspect of your work. What do you guys see as next steps for this project? Like, what's the next question beyond salinity, and what do you want to focus on next?
I think overall it would be really nice to be able to make some predictions about the livelihood of the San Joaquin Valley based on our experiments. I think it'd be really amazing to kind of make an estimate of how long we have until this really starts to affect our crops and makes them unhealthy for consumption. I know that right now we are working on a big paper that outlines our experience in WISRD, our 4 years. And so we've been meeting with a writing coach who has been very helpful. And so we're currently in the midst of writing a methods paper, which is just kind of about our experience building a lab and our research questions. And then we will add that to our larger paper to kind of leave as a legacy, our legacy. And then personally, I am very interested in genetic engineering, and it's something that I've researched on my own time, and I think it would be really amazing and interesting to look at the genotype of butterhead lettuce and study the gene that is responsible for the plant salinity resistance. And I know this is kind of a long shot, and we would need to collaborate with someone who has the ability and the resources to make this possible, but I think it would be amazing.
Yeah, that definitely seems like a doable next step, given how you guys have already set yourself up to have some great collaborations and networking.
So, how do you guys feel that the research in the Institute model has impacted you as a learner? Do you see any skills or mindsets you've developed in the Institute influencing how you function in other contexts? I mean, I know you guys were talking about tool use, how I feel like nowadays a lot of schools don't teach you how to use certain tools, but what are some other skills and abilities that you think this context-based Institute model has made you more adept at?
So having the experience of being a PI last year we were 6 people and we were split across classes. I really learned to value diversity in perspective and collaboration. I learned how important it was to have team meetings in order for all of us to make progress so that we can discuss each other's personal progress and also any difficulties we may have encountered. Like I said before, different people bring different areas of strength to the table, and so it's really beneficial to be able to tackle problems from very different perspectives. And I think being someone who tends to be more reserved in group settings, it's been very important for me to make sure that not one person dominates the discussion when we're talking about the future of our lab. And I want everyone to feel heard and like their opinion matters. And so I think that in WISRD, I've learned how to be more confident in my ideas but also be open to being proved wrong and be more receptive to feedback. I've learned that collaboration is about how you can help others, but also knowing when's time to step back and let other people help you. And overall, I feel way more comfortable and confident speaking in group settings and to larger groups of people.
For me, being in the Institute makes me more of a flexible learner. And so because certain things in our lab, having gone through certain procedures and having them fail, it brings me out of this is how it's going to exactly work out, and because it may not always. And so it brings me to a level of adjustment. I'm going to adjust and adapt to our different situations. Like one of the stories that Ximena and I like to bring up is during our first year when we did some bean sprouts, and they actually got moldy and died. And I was terrified that Joe was going to be mad at us because we killed our plants. But Joe was like, no, this is incredible. Like, why did this happen? And so it made me think of different perspectives, and like, this isn't a bad thing. This is a reason for growth. And then I've also developed more social skills in terms of like presentation and sharing my knowledge of hydroponics to the general public. Like, I am able to speak on this podcast because of my years at WISRD. Yeah.
Well, thank you two so much for coming to the podcast. We really appreciate it. Can we make sure the listeners can figure out where to find the hydroponics page and your guys' personal pages?
Yes, of course. So listeners can go to WISRD.org and then find the members tab, and then search up for our names, which is Sadie G and Ximena P. We also have a hydroponics webpage in our projects section. So that's where they can find us.
And those links will also be posted on our website along with this podcast. But you can also find the links to our Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to keep up with WISRD. We're just WISRD, WISRD, on all those platforms. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Sadie and Ximena, for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, see you in the next one.